Usually when we talk about a diagnosis, whether it's medical or mechanical or even just trying to figure out why your car won't start, there's this baseline expectation of precision.
Right. We crave that engineering mindset.
Exactly. Picture being in a hospital room. You've just fallen off a ladder, your arm is throbbing, and the doctor puts an X-ray up on the light board. There's an immense psychological relief when they point to that jagged white line in the bone and say, there it is. That's the fracture. That is the cause of your pain.
Oh, totally. It provides a really profound sense of safety. I mean, the human mind fundamentally wants reality to be binary and objective.
Broken or not broken.
Yeah, cause and effect. The ladder fell, the bone snapped, the pain arrived. It's a clean, visible, linear progression.
And we organize our entire lives around that linearity.
Yeah.
I mean, you drop a glass, gravity pulls it down, the hard tile floor shatters it, you have an independent glass, an independent floor, and an action connecting them.
It's just how we navigate the physical world.
Right. But then you step into the world of second-century Buddhist philosophy, specifically the mind-bending ontological machinery of Nāgārjuna, and suddenly that comforting X-ray machine is completely shattered.
It really is.
We find ourselves looking at this diagnostic landscape of causality that is aggressively murky.
And that murkiness is entirely by design. Nāgārjuna isn't trying to give us a clearer X-ray image. He's actually trying to dismantle our belief in the X-ray machine itself.
He's going after the root of it.
Exactly. He's attacking our addiction to that clean, linear causality.
Well, welcome back to another deep dive into the profound philosophical machinery of Nāgārjuna's Mūlamadhyamakakārikā, or the MMK.
It's great to be back in the weeds with this text.
As peers on this journey, you already know the terrain we've covered. We've traversed those intense deconstructions of causality back in Chapter 1, the mechanics of motion in Chapter 2, perception in Chapter 3, and then karmic production and the illusion of the pre-existent self in Chapters 8 and 9.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. You are already deeply familiar with how our ordinary, conditioned, dualistic mind naturally slices reality into these rigid triads, right? The actor, the acting, and the result.
The subject, the action, the object. Our minds are conditioned to see those as three separate, solid puzzle pieces that just sort of snap together to form our daily experience.
And Nāgārjuna's method, his famous logical tetralemma, is designed to systematically dismantle that exact assumption.
Piece by piece.
But today, our mission focuses entirely on Chapter 10 of the text, which is the examination of fire and fuel, or Agnindhanaparīkṣā.
This is a huge one.
It's massive. And the central questions we are bringing to this deep dive are just foundational. We're looking at the mechanics of the karmic cycle itself. The question is kindling or clinging, what the Sanskrit texts call upādāna, is it really the ultimate cause and the fuel of the effect?
Meaning, is clinging the absolute engine of the illusory self, of our bondage, and of the entire cycle of samsara?
Right. And the necessary follow-up question that stems from that is, if clinging is the fuel, is simply stopping or extinguishing that clinging really the absolute solution for liberation?
Is ceasing the fuel the true definition of nirvana?
Exactly. To get to the bottom of this, we're going to apply the rigorous 11-step Madhyamaka diagnostic framework. We'll be taking those exact diagnostic tools and turning them directly onto the causality of karmic rebirths, specifically through this metaphor of fire and fuel.
And we have to start by understanding why Nāgārjuna chose that specific metaphor.
Right, because it's not random.
Not at all. He is targeting the traditional Abhidharma schools of thought. And for them, the fire and fuel analogy wasn't just a casual comparison. It was the dominant paradigm. To grasp what we are deconstructing, we need to inhabit that opponent's worldview for a minute.
Okay, let's unpack this, because on the surface, it feels incredibly intuitive. In this traditional Abhidharma view, the cycle of saṃsāra, the endless cycle of suffering and rebirth, is viewed explicitly through the physics of a blazing fire.
Right, it's a very visceral image.
Yeah. The 5 aggregates that make up a human being, our physical form, our feelings, our perceptions, our mental formations, and our consciousness, those 5 things are categorized as the fuel or the kindling.
They're the dry wood stacked in the forest. And when this human fuel is consumed by the active psychological forces of greed, hatred, and delusion, the fire of samsara ignites, it blazes.
And the self, as it operates within this cycle, is essentially seen as the continuity of this burning process.
Exactly. So the logic for achieving liberation, or nirvana, becomes completely linear. The Abhidharma logic says, if you want to put out the fire, you simply remove the fuel.
which makes sense.
It does. You stop clinging to those 5 aggregates. You extinguish the craving, the upādāna. You stop throwing logs onto the fire. And eventually the fire simply has to go out. The cycle of rebirth stops.
I mean, I have to admit, standing in the shoes of the opponent, that sounds like undeniable, airtight logic. If I am camping in the woods and I want to put out my campfire before I go to sleep, I don't try to philosophize the fire away.
Right. You don't debate with the embers.
I just stop putting branches on it. I let the embers die out. Why is Nāgārjuna going out of his way to attack such a functionally sound practical metaphor? It honestly feels like he's picking a fight with common sense.
He is absolutely picking a fight with common sense, but more specifically, he's attacking the underlying unspoken assumptions of that common sense.
How so?
Well, the metaphor is functionally useful in a conventional, everyday sense, yes. If you stop putting wood on a physical campfire, it dies. But the Abhidharma schools were taking that conventional usefulness and smuggling in a profound metaphysical claim. They were treating these elements, the fire and the fuel, the self and the clinging, as real, inherently existing entities, absolute building blocks of reality.
So step 1 of this diagnostic framework, let's translate this campfire metaphor into the triad of causality that sustains the cycle of rebirths, just so we can see the exact target Nāgārjuna is aiming at. We have 3 distinct spheres in this Abhidharma model.
Right, we can map them out cleanly. The first sphere is the cause. This is the dry wood, the kindling. In psychological terms, this is the clinging, the attachment, or the grasping, the upādāna.
Okay, got it.
The second sphere is the causing, or the sustaining. This is the relational action itself, the dynamic karmic process of burning, the heat transferring from the ember to the wood.
And the third sphere?
The third sphere is the effect. The fire itself, which corresponds to the illusory self or the continuum of the karmic cycle, saṃsāra.
So cause, causality, effect. Kindling, burning, fire, clinging, karmic action, the self in saṃsāra.
That's the triad.
The Abhidharma posits that the self, the fire, is deeply dependent on the clinging, the kindling, but is also fundamentally distinct from it. Just like a physical flame flickering in the air isn't the exact same chemical substance as the solid piece of oak it sits on.
Exactly. The self is sustained by clinging, but exists as a separate thing. And this raises an important question, which brings us to step 2 of the diagnostic.
Right, the tetralemma.
If we assume, as the opponent does, that these 3 spheres are solid, inherently existing entities, meaning they have their own independent absolute essence, how do they actually interact?
We know from our previous deep dives into causality that the moment you declare 2 things to be absolutely inherently separate, you run into insurmountable physical and logical roadblocks.
So let's bring in the tetralemma, the 4-cornered logic, and see if this Abhidharma campfire can withstand the pressure. We're going to walk through verses 1 through 14 of chapter 10.
Nāgārjuna uses this tool to demonstrate that these 3 spheres cannot logically be established as identical, they cannot be different, they cannot be both, and they cannot be neither.
He starts by ruthlessly testing the spatial and logical boundaries between the fire and the fuel. Are they occupying the same space? Do they share an identity? Let's test the first corner of the tetralemma, identity. Verses 1 through 7 tackle this dynamic of identity versus difference. Let's look at identity first. Are the fire, representing the self, and the fuel, representing the clinging, inherently identical?
Well, let's visualize that. If they were inherently identical, as Nāgārjuna points out in verse 1, the agent of the action and the object of the action absurdly collapse into a single entity. The consumer and the consumed become one and the same.
Right, the logic of action requires a differential. If the fire is the exact same thing as the fuel, then the wood is already burning before any ignition ever takes place, because its very nature is the fire.
Think about baking. If I have raw flour and sugar on my counter, and I say that the raw ingredients are fundamentally inherently identical to a fully baked cake, the entire concept of baking vanishes.
You would need an oven.
Exactly. The action connecting the cause to the effect ceases to exist because there's no distance between them. If the self is identically the same thing as the clinging, there's no distinction between the grasper and grasped. The whole structure of causality just collapses into a dot.
So establishing them as inherently identical fails the test of logic. The action disappears. This naturally forces the dualistic mind to jump in a panic to the second corner of the tetralemma, difference.
Right, if they aren't the exact same thing, they must be completely, inherently different and separate.
Which, again, feels intuitively correct. Wood is solid, fibrous, and cold. A flame is gaseous, luminous, and hot. They have wildly different chemical properties.
Conventionally, nobody is arguing that a log is indistinguishable from a flame.
But Nāgārjuna is asking a much more dangerous question here. Are they inherently different? Do they possess absolute, independent, closed-loop essences? Because if fire and fuel are inherently different, verse 2 introduces a catastrophic implication.
What's that?
If they are absolutely separate, fire could exist entirely without fuel.
Oh, because an independent entity, by definition, doesn't rely on anything else for its existence.
Precisely. If fire has an inherent fireness that is totally, completely walled off from woodness, then it doesn't need the wood to sustain its existence. It would burn eternally in a vacuum without a cause.
Which is absurd.
And furthermore, an inherently independent entity is sealed off in an airtight metaphysical box. If the self is completely inherently separate from the objects of clinging, they could never actually cross the void to interact.
Let me break down the physics of that interaction,
Yeah.
because to interact means to be modified. If the fire actually touches the wood undergoes a drastic chemical change. It turns into ash and smoke.
Right, it transforms.
And the fire changes too. It shape shifts, its temperature fluctuates based on the density of the wood. They become contingent on one another the millisecond they touch.
And an absolute independent entity cannot be modified. If it is modified, it proves it was never independent to begin with. It was susceptible to outside forces.
Right.
So if we insist they are inherently different, there is an unbridgeable void between them. The fire can never reach the fuel without destroying its own independent status.
I want to genuinely defend the opponent here, because the Abhidharma scholars weren't oblivious to this. They raise a very human, very relatable analogy in verse 6 to defend their position.
The parent and child analogy.
Yeah, the opponent says, just as a woman joins with a man, and a man is joined with a woman, though fire is other than the fuel, it's fitting that it meets with it. It's like interlocking puzzle pieces. Can't the fire and the fuel just be distinct, inherently existing things that are simply designed to connect?
It's a clever defense. They're trying to salvage inherent difference by introducing the concept of fitness, but Nāgārjuna's rebuttal in verse 7 is characterized by a surgical precision that just dismantles it. He points out a glaring temporal flaw.
Oh.
For a man and woman or two puzzle pieces to inherently connect, they must first exist as entirely independent, fully formed entities before the connection ever takes place.
They have to be standing alone in the room before they shake hands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if they are truly inherently separate and independent, their very interaction would destroy the defining characteristic of their independence. Look closely at the puzzle pieces. If a puzzle piece is truly absolute and independent, it cannot possess an edge that is defined by its missing counterpart.
Ah, I see. A piece with a hole in it implies a dependence on a piece with a peg.
Yes. The moment the fire meets the fuel, its state is entirely contingent upon the fuel. Thus, it was never an independent, separate entity to begin with. The interaction itself refutes their inherent separation.
Wow. Okay, so the boundaries dissolve.
Yeah.
We've tested identity and difference. They cannot be inherently identical, because the action of burning collapses into a singularity.
Right.
And they cannot be inherently different, because they would be locked in airtight boxes unable to touch, which logically means they cannot be both, because that's a blatant contradiction, and they cannot be neither, because clearly I can go outside and see a fire burning, and I can look inside myself and feel the heat of clinging.
The conventional reality is undeniably happening.
Right. So where does he go next?
This failure of spatial logic leads Nāgārjuna to shift his attack in verses 8 through 13. He moves away from testing identity and difference and begins testing dependence and independence. He applies the four-cornered logic to the dimension of time.
This is where we run into the temporal paradox.
Mm.
Let's try to build a timeline for these supposedly inherent entities.
Let's attempt it. If we say that fire depends entirely on fuel to exist, and fuel depends entirely on fire to be fuel, which one establishes its existence first in time?
Okay, let me map this out. Let's say at time point 1, I have a piece of wood sitting in a fire pit. It's just sitting there. At time point 2, a spark lands on it. At time point 3, it's burning, so it's officially fuel.
Okay, track that.
But wait, if it is not inherently fuel at time point 1, then what is the fire burning at time point 2? By definition, a fire requires fuel. So if the fire is established in dependence on fuel, the fuel must exist first to serve as the baseline.
But how can you possibly have fuel if there's no fire to consume it? A piece of wood is just a piece of wood. A biological organism is just a biological organism. It only gains the relational identity of fuel when a fire acts upon it.
That's wild. The identity of the cause relies entirely on the backward-reaching existence of the effect.
You cannot have a cause without an effect, just as you cannot be a parent without a child. The moment the child is born, the parent is simultaneously born. Before that, they were just a person.
Right.
So if the fuel depends on the fire to be fuel, and the fire depends on the fuel to burn, neither one can establish a firm baseline in time. Verse 10 poses the ultimate paradox. If something that has been established in dependence on a thing is that on which depends that very thing's existence, what has been established in dependence upon what?
They're just leaning against each other in a void. Neither has a footing. Imagine two playing cards leaning against each other to form a triangle. If you try to establish which card was placed first to support the second, the whole structure collapses. It's an infinite regress.
They cannot be inherently related in time, nor can they be inherently unrelated. They cannot be continuous, and they cannot be discontinuous. Every single extreme ontological position, whether it's eternalism or annihilationism, leads to infinite regress, logical contradiction, or utter absurdity.
He just methodically walks around the Abhidharma's reality and unplugs every single cable holding it up.
Verse 14 synthesizes this entire sweeping deconstruction. The fuel is not the fire. Neither is there fire apart from fuel. The fire is not a thing possessed of fuel. The fuel is not within the fire, nor fire in fuel.
This brings us to a crucial pivot in the diagnostic. That's step 3. We've watched the tetralemma shatter every rigid assumption. And the necessary conclusion to draw from this wreckage is the realization of emptiness.
Because every single corner of the tetralemma collapses under this grueling spatial and temporal analysis, we are forced to conclude that these three spheres, the clinging, the sustaining karmic action, and the illusory self, are entirely empty of inherent existence.
Svabhava is absent.
Exactly. They are never absolute.
Meaning the idea of an absolute inherently existent sustaining of the fire is mathematically impossible.
There is no real, inherently existent clinging floating out in the universe, nor is there an absolute state of non-clinging that functions as the ultimate engine of either samsara or nirvana. The solid building blocks we thought we were playing with simply do not exist as independent objects.
I want to spend significant time on this transition to step 4, because this is where the constructive core of Madhyamaka really emerges. It is incredibly easy to hear the word emptiness, look at the wreckage of the tetralemma, and think Nāgārjuna is dropping us into a bleak, nihilistic black hole where nothing matters, nothing exists, and we are just floating in a void.
But it's the exact opposite.
Right. From this profound emptiness, it necessarily follows that the spheres are inseparable. They are dependently co-originated, interdependent, co-emergent, and co-evolving.
The emptiness is the very mechanism that allows them to co-evolve. Because they lack rigid, unyielding boundaries, they can interact. The fire and the fuel, the self and the clinging are mere designations. They are conventional truths co-imputed by the mind. They are fluid, dynamic processes, not solid nouns.
And the commentaries don't just leave this as some abstract, high-altitude cosmological theory. They bring this dependent co-origination all the way down to the micro level of our daily psychology. It's about a self-amplifying loop of karmic updating happening millisecond by millisecond inside our nervous systems.
This is where the psychological genius of the Madhyamaka framework really shines. The self, the fire, and the clinging, the fuel, are not static entities that occasionally bump into each other during your day. They are a continuous, volatile, endlessly looping feedback system.
Let's use a highly specific physical analogy to ground this. Let's look at the analogy of the dog on the sidewalk.
Perfect example.
Imagine you are walking down the street, and a golden retriever comes walking toward you on a leash. In our ordinary, unexamined dualistic framework, we assume the dog is an inherently existing object broadcasting a fixed, objective reality of dogness into the world.
Right.
And we assume you are an inherently existing subject, a fixed self, passively receiving that reality.
But in the Madhyamaka framework, we have to look at the dependent origination of that moment. The perceiver, state, yourself, the fire is deeply conditioned by your past karma. And we need to clarify that karma here isn't some mystical cosmic justice system keeping score.
It's not a bank account.
No, it is the accumulated physical and psychological momentum of your past actions. It's your biological wiring, your memories, your traumas.
Let's say you were viciously bitten by a dog when you were 5 years old.
Yeah.
That physical trauma rewired your amygdala. It changed your nervous system. That trauma is your karma. It has shaped your perceiver state.
Exactly.
So when you encounter that golden retriever on the sidewalk 20 years later, the clinging, the upādāna, which in this specific case manifests as a visceral reaction of fear and aversion, acts as the fuel.
In that fraction of a second, your conditioned mind instantaneously imputes the label of threat onto the dog. The dog functionally becomes a dangerous, terrifying beast in your localized reality. You are projecting the fuel onto the object.
And here's where the loop closes. That interaction, that dependent relation, instantaneously updates your internal state. Your heart rate spikes to 130 beats per minute, adrenaline floods your bloodstream, your pupils dilate.
You are now a newly updated perceiver.
The fire has consumed that specific fuel of fear, and its heat and shape have completely changed.
And because your internal biological and psychological state has just updated, you are now looking back out at a newly perceived world. If the golden retriever playfully barks, your updated, highly sensitized, terrified perceiver state processes that sound as aggression.
It confirms the threat.
Yes, generating more fear, which acts as fresh fuel, which further updates the self. It is a terrifying, self-amplifying loop of dependent origination.
Now contrast that entirely with someone walking right next to you on the exact same sidewalk. Let's say they grew up breeding golden retrievers. They have entirely different karmic conditioning.
A different perceiver state.
Right. They look at the exact same arrangement of atoms, the exact same photons hitting their retinas, and their perceiver state imputes joy, warmth, and safety. They generate a totally different kind of fuel, and their fire burns with a completely different quality.
The clinging, the fuel, and the self, the fire, are not fixed entities waiting in a void. They are a fluid, dreamlike interplay, updating millisecond by millisecond. You are co-creating the dog as a threat, and the perceived threat of the dog is co-creating your terrified self.
Which perfectly leads us into step 5.
Yeah.
This brings us to a profound symmetry in Nāgārjuna's system, the union of the two truths. The three spheres, the cause, the sustaining action, the effect, are empty of absolute inherent existence precisely because they are dependently co-arisen.
And they can only dependently co-arise because they are empty of absolute reality. Emptiness and dependent origination are not two different phenomena, they are two sides of the exact same coin.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. If the self and the clinging were solid, inherently existing things, like the airtight boxes we discussed earlier, they could never interact.
The trauma of the childhood dog bite couldn't possibly alter your nervous system if your nervous system was an absolute, unchangeable, independent entity.
Emptiness is the necessary breathing room that allows karma to function. It is the flexibility of the universe. Without emptiness, nothing could ever change. The fact that things change, interact, and cause effects is the ultimate proof that they are empty of inherent, permanent essence. One truth flawlessly supports and enables the other.
Okay, so step 6. Because of this incredible union of emptiness and dependent origination, the sources we are looking at draw a fascinating conclusion. They say that these three spheres are like illusions. They're like reflections in a mirror, like mirages in a desert, like dreams, and like echoes in a canyon. They're described as being there, yet not there.
They are a karmic mirage. The entire causal cycle of clinging, action, and rebirth is a mirage co-created by the mind's interaction with conditions.
I have to challenge this mirage analogy because whenever these texts use words like illusion or mirage, it becomes a massive sticking point for people.
It definitely triggers a lot of resistance.
Yeah, if I'm wandering in the Mojave Desert, dehydrated, and I see a shimmering mirage of a lake, I might run up to it and try to drink. I get a mouthful of dry sand. It doesn't function. It is a false image.
Right.
But if the wall of my house is an illusion, a mirage, and I walk into it headfirst at full speed, it breaks my nose. The pain is real. The blood dripping on my shirt is real. The emergency room bill is very real. How can you sit there looking at a broken nose and tell me the wall is a mirage?
It is a critical pushback, and it highlights why we have to so carefully distinguish conventional functionality from absolute reality. When Madhyamaka philosophy says the wall or the self is a mirage, it absolutely does not mean it is a hallucination. It does not mean it doesn't exist conventionally.
The broken cartilage in my nose strongly advocates for its conventional existence.
Exactly. The biological matter of your face interacting with the atomic structure of the wall according to the laws of classical physics, causing a neurological pain response to fire up your spinal cord, that is the very definition of dependent origination. It is conventional functionality working flawlessly. But, and this is the crux of the entire philosophy, that perfect conventional functionality does not give the wall an absolute, independent, eternal reality.
Because it's still a temporary web of conditions.
The wall is empty of an essential, eternal wallness. If you change the conditions, say a wrecking ball hits it, it ceases to be a wall. If you zoom into a subatomic level with an electron microscope, the solid wall disappears into almost entirely empty space and fluctuating energy fields.
And over time.
If you view the wall over a geological timescale of 10 million years, it's just scattered dust blown across a continent. It is a temporary, fleeting aggregation of conditions that our minds freeze in time and label wall.
It is a karmic mirage co-created by conditions lacking a standalone core. It is there functionally in this specific moment, but not there inherently in eternity.
Our minds take the temporary functional appearance and mistake it for an eternal, absolute essence. Think about the echo in a canyon. When you shout, the echo bounces back and hits your ears. It is functionally real, it moves the air, it vibrates your eardrum.
Right.
But if you try to go find the inherent source of the echo hiding behind a rock, you will find nothing. The echo is dependently originated by the shape of the canyon, the density of the air, and your vocal cords. We suffer because we are treating echoes like they are solid, permanent objects we can hoard or destroy.
Which demands a shift in how we categorize reality. Step 7. We have to move beyond dualities. Nāgārjuna deploys what is often called the generalized tetralemma. He expands the logical scope beyond just fire and fuel, beyond just cause and effect, to encompass literally every conceptual enclosure the human mind is capable of building.
He takes the fourfold negation and essentially goes scorched earth on the limitations of language itself. He affirms that the spheres and all of reality are not this, they're not non-this, they're not both, and they are not neither. And he explicitly states there is no hidden fifth option. Reality completely evades all conditioned, dualistic conceptual proliferation.
No matter what conceptual box I try to construct to trap reality, the box dissolves the moment I try to close the lid.
Which demands a radically new attitude toward reality, and this is step 9, the middle way. This is not a compromise between two extremes. It is a position entirely free from all extremes.
It's a completely different vantage point.
Yes. It is free from this or non-this, and it is free from the middle ground of both or neither. It transcends objectivism and realism, which try to claim things have solid, inherent existence.
And it equally transcends subjectivism and solipsism, which try to claim nothing exists outside my own mind and it's all just a hallucination.
It transcends relationism, dualism, and pluralism.
I want to pause on this because when we strip away dualism, when we say things aren't inherently separate, a lot of people immediately jump to a specific conclusion. If it's not separate and not dualistic, isn't it just a giant cosmic oneness? A featureless soup?
Yes.
I mean, this is where a vast amount of modern spirituality lands. We are all one. The universe is just one giant interconnected blob of energy.
It is a huge misconception that emptiness equates to a featureless cosmic soup, and Nāgārjuna explicitly denies monism or radical oneness.
Why isn't it all one? It sounds so peaceful to just say we are all one.
Think about it biologically, practically, and mechanically. If monism were true, if there were absolutely no distinction whatsoever between the subject and the object, the biological mechanism of perception, interaction, and life itself would completely shut down.
How so?
Let's go back to the terrifying golden retriever on the sidewalk. If you and the dog were literally the exact same undifferentiated cosmic soup, a dog bite couldn't physically occur.
Because teeth cannot pierce skin if there is no boundary between teeth and skin. A sword cannot cut itself.
Emptiness doesn't melt everything down into a gray, homogeneous void. It actually requires the dynamic play of difference on a conventional level. You need conventional boundaries for things to happen, for life to function, for ecosystems to breathe, and most importantly, for compassion to exist.
Oh, that's beautiful.
While these boundaries are vivid, beautiful, and highly functional conventionally, they remain entirely empty, ultimately. The middle way does not erase the vividness of the world, it erases the delusion that the vividness is absolute and permanent.
So we have a reality that is vividly apparent, fully functional, entirely interconnected, and utterly empty of inherent essence. Which brings us to step 10. We have to bring this soaring, reality-bending philosophy back down to the pavement. We have to figure out how to live with this.
The Monday morning alarm clock still rings regardless of emptiness.
Exactly. We have to go to work, we have to pay taxes, we have to navigate traffic jams, and we have to deal with difficult people.
Yeah.
How do we navigate a world of mirages without becoming completely detached and apathetic?
The texts suggest we must use these spheres, the self, the clinging, the rebirths, conventionally and relatively, but never reify them in absolute terms. We must engage without attachment, without reification, and without absolute effort. We have to act without acting.
Acting without acting. We utilize the concepts of self and object because they are useful tools for navigating society, but we do so fully knowing their true empty nature. I often think about this concept of acting, without acting through the lens of a highly immersive, intensely difficult video game. Take a game like Elden Ring. It is a notoriously punishing game. You die constantly. It's an incredibly high-stress environment designed to test your reflexes and your patience.
It produces a genuine physiological response.
Extremely genuine. When you are playing the game, you are fully engaged. You strategize, you dodge attacks, you study the boss's movements, you use every tool the game provides to survive. That is the conventional truth. You have to play by the rules of the local physics engine to progress.
Right. You can't ignore the rules.
You can't just drop the controller, stare at the screen, and say, well, it's all an illusion, none of this matters.
Because if you do that, your character will get immediately roasted by a dragon and you won't progress.
But deep down, no matter how intense the boss fight gets, no matter how fast your heart beats or how much you palm sweat, you never forget you are playing a game. You know that the dragon breathing fire on your screen isn't made of actual biological scales and thermodynamic heat.
It's code.
It's an illusion made of code, polygons, and pixels on an LED screen. Because you fundamentally understand its ultimate emptiness, you don't suffer genuine, lasting existential trauma when your character dies. You might be frustrated conventionally, but you aren't destroyed absolutely. You act without acting. You function skillfully in the simulation, but you are liberated from taking it as absolute reality.
It is a phenomenal, highly relatable analogy for skillful engagement and navigating conventional reality without grasping. But from a strict Madhyamaka perspective, I want to pressure test it.
Let's do it.
We have to be careful because there is a subtle ontological trap hidden in the video game metaphor, just as there is in movies like The Matrix.
Where does the analogy break down when applied to Nāgārjuna?
In Elden Ring, or in The Matrix, the dragon is an illusion, yes. But that illusion is built upon a solid base reality. There is a physical server rack sitting in a data center somewhere. There is underlying code written by human programmers. There is a microchip processing electrical currents. The danger of the simulation analogy is that it implies there is a hidden base reality running the universe behind the scenes.
Oh, like there is an absolute truth, a solid ground, hiding behind the curtain of the illusion.
And Nāgārjuna is far more radical than that. He is saying there is no code. There is no base layer of pixels. There is no server running the simulation. It is empty all the way down. The emptiness itself is the reality. There is no real world hiding behind the interdependent illusion. The interdependent illusion is all there is.
That is a crucial, mind-bending distinction. So, liberation isn't about finding the red pill and unplugging from the simulation to wake up in a gritty, real-world hovercraft.
Liberation happens right here, in the middle of the traffic jam, in the middle of the office meeting, in the middle of the family argument. It happens by fundamentally changing our relationship to the phenomena arising around us.
We navigate our careers and our relationships skillfully, but we stop reifying them.
Exactly. We stop treating a failure at work as an indelible, permanent stain on our inherent self because we realize neither the failure nor the self has inherent existence. They are just a fleeting convergence of conditions.
And realizing this, according to the sources, leads mechanically, almost involuntarily, to boundless compassion, which can sound completely counterintuitive to someone hearing this for the first time because words like emptiness and mirage can sound incredibly cold. They sound detached, clinical, and devoid of emotion.
When emptiness is misunderstood as nihilism, yes, it sounds cold. But logically, ontologically, it produces the exact opposite effect.
How so?
If you truly realize there is no inherently existing separate I, then you simultaneously realize there is no inherently existing separate other. The boundary separating you from the person suffering next to you on the subway is revealed to be a conventional designation, a temporary conceptual tool, not an absolute metaphysical wall.
So compassion isn't just a moral commandment handed down from above.
Yeah.
It isn't a forced ethical obligation. It's the physical, ontological truth of the universe asserting itself.
Consider the relationship between your left hand and your right hand.
Yeah.
When your left hand accidentally brushes against a red-hot stove, your right hand doesn't pause to debate the moral ethics of assisting the left hand.
Right.
It doesn't weigh the pros and cons or consider if the left hand deserves to be burned or say, well, that's the left hand's karma. It needs to learn a lesson.
It just acts.
The right hand inherently feels the interconnectedness of the single organism, and it acts instantly, spontaneously, to pull the left hand away. Helping someone in pain is as spontaneous as that. The suffering of the world is literally your own suffering because the absolute boundary defining you against the world is an illusion.
This brings us to the absolute zenith of the diagnostic framework, step 11. We are arriving at the true cause and the real meaning of nirvana.
When you are finally stripped of these dualistic delusions, when you stop trying to freeze the mirage into a solid object, a profound shift in perception occurs. You perceive everything as primordially equal, pure, perfect, complete, divine, and one. But again, strictly in the non-dual sense, not many, not one, not both, not neither.
It's resting in reality exactly as it is without adding or subtracting anything.
The Sanskrit term for this is tathata, suchness. It is the raw, unfiltered experience of the dependently originated world.
So we have to bring this all the way back to the initial question that started this entire deep dive into Chapter 10. We looked at the Abhidharma campfire. We asked, is kindling, clinging, upādāna really the ultimate cause and fuel of samsāra? And is simply stopping that clinging the absolute solution for achieving nirvana?
Nāgārjuna's final synthesis delivers a fatal structural blow to the Abhidharma opponent. By applying the tetralemma and revealing the emptiness of the spheres, he demonstrates that it is not inherently the kindling, the clinging, that acts as the absolute root cause of the fire of samsāra.
Because neither the clinging nor the samsāra possess the inherent existence required to act as absolute independent causes or effects.
Therefore, the Abhidharma solution, merely trying to stop or extinguish clinging, is revealed to be a deeply flawed, highly dualistic solution. It is an attempt to freeze a fluid reality.
Trying to pause the movie.
Yes. Think about the psychological mechanics of it. The very act of intensely trying to stop clinging is itself a subtle, incredibly sticky form of attachment. You are attached to a goal. You are reifying a solid self who is striving to achieve freedom from a solid world. It keeps you trapped on the hamster wheel of the dualistic framework.
If the root cause of our suffering isn't clinging, if it isn't the fuel itself, what is it?
The true root cause is fundamental ignorance. The Sanskrit term is avidya. It is ignorance regarding the true, empty, dependently originated nature of phenomena. We suffer not simply because we cling, but because we fundamentally misunderstand the nature of what we are clinging to.
We mistake the echo for a solid object. We mistake the mirage for a lake.
Exactly. And so the solution isn't just behavioral modification. It isn't just gritting your teeth and refusing to put logs on the fire. The solution is a total paradigm shift in perception.
The solution is wisdom, prajna. Nirvana is not about dualistically extinguishing craving, desire, or the karmic cycle. You don't put the fire out. Nirvana is realizing the true nature and dynamic of samsāra, exactly as it is, illuminated by the union of the two truths.
Think about the person who was bitten by the dog. If they operate from ignorance, they spend their whole life trying to destroy dogs, or running away from them, or trying to extinguish their fear through sheer willpower.
But if they operate from wisdom,
they recognize the fear rising, they recognize the karmic loop of the amygdala, and they simply see it as a dependent arising, empty of inherent essence. The fear might still rise conventionally, but it no longer binds them absolutely. They see the suchness of the moment.
the karmic cycle, this endless loop of cause and effect, the self and the five aggregates are not identical, they are not different, they are not both, and they are not neither. They are deeply interdependent and entirely empty. They are a timeless, multidimensional dance.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a luminous, centerless fractal cycle to be understood and embraced with wisdom and boundless compassion. You don't escape the cycle, you wake up inside it.
And that leaves us with a monumental paradigm shift to walk away with. I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. We've spent this entire time talking about reality as a limitless, centerless, holographic fractal of dependent origination. If that is true, if there is no base reality to escape to, then the universal project, the grand scheme of human existence, is not a linear path designed for us to find the exit door.
We aren't trying to beat the simulation.
What if your highest purpose is simply creating without creating, and awakening without awakening? What if the ultimate goal is to participate effortlessly in the beautiful, endless symphony of the karmic cycle? Finding ultimate freedom not by leaving the dance, but by finally hearing the music.
And realizing that the X-ray we were so desperately looking at was never meant to show a solid bone. It was only ever meant to show the light passing through it.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.